So there's something I realized while trying to code a game from scratch. It's that 24 hours just isn't enough time. But how exactly did we get here? Let me explain it to you. First things first, I started out by creating the teams. There's a maximum of 8 teams in Bedwars, each team having its unique color and island along with their bed. The team's color influences their wool, bed, armor, and other aspects of the game. I also made an arena system where each game has its own separate arena, allowing us to play multiple games at the same time. Then I coded a map system, where every map has a configuration file that specifies the different locations for the beds, spawns, generators, and much more. But more of that in a second. In the meantime, I asked my friend Miskin to build me a test map that I could use for the sake of development, and it actually turned out really good. After configuring the map, it was time to test what we have so far. It's not much, but at least you spawn on your team's island, you can break and place blocks, and the game seems to be working really nice. The next step was to add a scoreboard, which displays information about the current status of the player, which can either be in-game, in lobby, or waiting for games to start. Scoreboards in Minecraft can have up to 16 lines, where each line is a unique team registered in the scoreboard. I simply made a scoreboard that automatically registers the team for every line, and updates the team's prefix and suffix, which are the text, automatically every tick. Scoreboard can have 3 different entries: empty entries, which will never be updated, fixed entries, which will only be updated once, and dynamic entries, which will be updated every time the scoreboard itself is updated. Every second in Minecraft is made up of 20 ticks, so we can only update the scoreboard up to 20 times a second. Now I'm going to be coding the beds. In Bedwars, players can only respawn when they die if their bed isn't broken, so I simply keep track of each team's bed in the code, and when that block is broken, I set a flag that prevents players from respawning on that. I also made sure every team's bed has that team's color, so that it looks really fancy, and as you can see there were some glitches that I found while doing this, but I managed to fix them pretty easily. Generators were a bit harder to code. The iron and gold generators are pretty straightforward. Just retrieve the location where they should be spawned from the nav configuration and run a task every 20 ticks for 1 second that spawns either an iron ingot or, more rarely, a gold one. Diamond and emerald generators, on the other hand, required a bit more code, because they not only spawn resources every X amount of seconds, but they also have a floating and rotating block above them, along with 2 holograms displaying the name of the generator and how much time is left until the next spawn. So I coded a simple hologram system and spawned an invisible armor stand 2 blocks above the generator's location, setting it set to a diamond or emerald block. I then spawned 2 holograms above it to display the correct information. Then, every tick I rotate the armor stand by a couple degrees to make it look like it's spinning, and update the hologram's text to show how much time there is left before the next spawn. The longest part of this whole experience was probably the item shop. That's where you can buy all sorts of items with the resources you gain from generators. This wasn't necessarily too hard, but it took a long time because I had to manually add each item to each category. For those of you who don't know, the shop is divided into 7 categories, each with its own items. Items can either be simple blocks, like wool, or completely custom items, like bridge eggs, more on that later. In the end, I managed to add all the items and the shop ended up looking really pretty. The item shop isn't the only place where you can buy stuff in Bedwars, so here's the upgrade shop. This is where you can buy abilities for your whole team, like sharpness and protection, but also traps that protect your bed from being destroyed, such as blindness and mining fatigue. This shop exclusively uses diamonds as currency, and it took way less time to code than the items shop, although some of the traps were a bit tricky. With the basics covered, I then started working on some of the finer details of the game. First off, I made it so players cannot break the map, but only blocks placed by other players. This is really simple, just store a list of blocks and add it to the list every time a block is placed. Then, when the block is broken, check if the list contains that block, and if it doesn't, just cancel the event. Then I disabled hunger, and started working on a win system, since as of right now if you kill everyone else you just kinda stay there. The win system is very simple. Every time a player dies, check how many teams have at least 1 player left. If there's only a single team, that team has won the game. If there's no teams, well, that should never happen. Next I decided to code the player's equipment. First of all, the player has a wooden sword given to them as soon as they respawn, and they also have leather armor that can be upgraded in the shop and persist between deaths. To make the armor persistent, I simply stored it in the map on death and gave it back to the player on respawn. Now, let's talk about some of the custom items I have to code. TNT is supposed to ignite instantly when you place it, so I simply listened for when the player right clicks a block with TNT, and instead of placing the block normally, I simply spawned an already lit TNT. Glass, on the other hand, is supposed to protect any block it covers from TNT explosions, so to code that I simply added some code that checks if a block has glass anywhere above it, and if it does, we prevent it from exploding. I did mess up the algorithm for this one by a single line of code, which caused the game to crash quite frequently when explosions happen. Fireballs are really easy as well. We simply need to launch one whenever the player right clicks for the fire charm. Bedbugs and team defenders are the main mobs in the game, and they simply attack players in other teams. These took a bit longer to code, as I had to make sure they wouldn't attack players in the same team and they actually worked properly. Bridge checks are really simple too. Just spawn a trail of blocks wherever Yeg goes, and it creates a fancy little bridge that the player can then use to quickly get from one island to the next. While I was doing all this, Miskin finished building a lobby, so I implemented that in my code as well, and made it so you're automatically teleported there when you first join a server. I also need to make sure that when a player is killed, all the resources end up in the killer's inventory. Through this, I have simply checked how many iron, gold, diamonds and emeralds the player has when they die, and give the same amount to the killer, if present. Last but not least, I implemented teams mode. This was extremely simple, because I had already written the code in such a way that will allow me to add teams in the future, so I got it to work in no time. And that's it! I made Bedwars in Minecraft in under 24 hours.